Don't let the knee brace fool you, because in his prime, he had no problem dunking on anybody. He's an Arizona basketball legend who led the Wildcats to one of their greatest seasons of all time. He was overshadowed by the legendary career of David Robinson during his own time with the Spurs, but is just as much of the reason for San Antonio's resurgence in the 90s. He could do a bit of everything on the offensive end and was a great three-point shooter for the era he played in. And he was no slouch on the defensive end either. But what made Sean Elliott so special was everything he went through in his career, while not complaining once and doing everything in his power to be there for his team. A high school knee injury put an asterisk beside his name from the jump, but he disproved a lot of the doubters with his durable and consistent play for the majority of his career. And then when it seemed like he wasn't taking things seriously in Detroit, you find out he had been suffering from a serious kidney ailment that would completely change his career trajectory. But even with a deteriorating kidney, he gave the Spurs everything he had during their '99 championship run, and then beat the odds to do something that no professional athlete had done before, which allowed him to walk away from the game on his own terms. He doesn't get talked about much anymore, but his career is one of the most underrated of all time. So that's why it's the focus of today's episode, on the Ninja, Sean Elliott. Let's jog your memory. An Arizona native, Sean Elliott attended Cholla High School. During his time there, he earned 3 varsity letters and led the Chargers to a 24-3 record and a berth in the Class 5A state tournament semifinals as a senior. In 1985, his 844 total points and 31.3 points per game were both single-season Class 5A state records at the time, as he became the first McDonald's All-American to come out of Tucson. Elliott would stay close to home and attend the University of Arizona under Hall of Fame coach Lute Olson. Elliott and Anthony Cook would be the team's top freshman recruits, but it would be Elliott who made an instant impact on a Wildcats team featuring junior guard Steve Kerr. As a freshman, Elliott led the team in scoring and minutes, and was second in rebounds. After 10 games, the Wildcats were 6-4, but would go 17-4 the rest of the way to finish the season at 23-8, and their 14-4 conference record earned them the Pac-10 championship. They would earn a tournament berth where they would play an Auburn Tigers team led by star senior Chuck Person. Elliott would have a great tournament debut, putting up 20 points, 6 boards, and 6 assists on nearly 59% shooting. But it wouldn't be enough, as they would be defeated in the first round. And Elliott's freshman season would see him put up about 15.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Going into 1987, the Wildcats welcomed some more future NBA talent in the form of junior transfer Tom Tolbert, as well as incoming freshman Judd Bushler, which led to a much improved offense, but a worse defense than the year prior. And Arizona would only manage an 18-10 record on the season. Elliott led the team in scoring and assists, while finishing third in rebounds, all while shooting over 51%. And he would also show his shooting stroke in the first season of the NCAA adopting the three-point line, as he shot over 37% from deep on over 3 attempts per game. This would be the first year of the modern Pac-10 tournament format, but Arizona would fall early, as they lost to Oregon in the quarterfinal. They would then draw UTEP and their star point guard Tim Hardaway in the first round of the NCAA tournament, where Elliott would put up a game-high 26 points, but would also commit 6 turnovers. Hardaway was a non-factor, scoring just 2 points, and Arizona looked to have the game in the bag. But an improbable comeback by UTEP forced the game into overtime, where Elliott would foul out and Arizona would lose. And Elliott's sophomore season ended with him averaging about 19.5 points, 6 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game, while being voted first team All-Pac-10. Arizona's 1988 season would be one of the best in program history. They would start the year ranked 17th in the nation, and over the course of the year, spent 11 weeks ranked number 1, as they finished the regular season at 28-2 while going undefeated at home. They featured a top 20 offense and defense, with 4 starters averaging double figures. Elliott again led the team in scoring while finishing tied for third in assists and rebounds, and did so on a career-high 57% from the field and over 47% from deep. They cruised through the Pac-10 tournament to win the conference title, and entered the NCAA tournament as a 1 seed, before going on a legendary tournament run. Elliott would score 17 in a blowout of Cornell in round 1, and follow that up with 19 in another blowout of Seton Hall in round 2. He would have a team-high 25 points and 8 assists in a Sweet 16 victory versus Iowa, and then have a team-high 24 points with 11 made free throws in an Elite 8 victory versus North Carolina. The Final Four brought a stacked Oklahoma team, and Elliott would have his best game of the tournament, as he dropped a game-high 31 and 11 rebounds, on nearly 58% shooting. But their season would sadly come to an end, as Oklahoma won by 8 points. And Elliott's junior season saw him put up about 19.5 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists per game, as he would be the Pac-10 Player of the Year and a consensus first-team All-American. The '89 Wildcats wouldn't be able to recreate the same team success, but Elliott firmly established himself as a top prospect in the upcoming draft. Kerr was gone to the NBA, leaving Elliott and fellow senior Anthony Cook as the team's best players. Elliott would lead the team and the conference in scoring, with a career-high 22.3 points per game, while tying for the team lead in rebounds and assists. He shot 48% from the field and nearly 44% from deep, while leading the conference in free throws. Arizona would finish the regular season at 24-3 as the top-ranked team in the nation, and were undefeated at home for the second straight season. They would again win the Pac-10 championship and enter the NCAA tournament as a 1 seed. Elliott would score a game-high 27 and go 4 for 4 from deep in the Wildcats' first-round defeat of Robert Morris. Elliott would follow that up with a game-high 25 on nearly 70% shooting in a round 2 defeat of Clemson, but their season came to an end in the Sweet 16 as they lost to UNLV by a single point. Elliott would again play great with a game-high 22 points and 14 rebounds on nearly 54% shooting, but his season and college career would be over. Elliott again was voted Pac-10 Player of the Year and a consensus first-team All-American, along with quite a few individual awards, as he finished with averages of 22.5 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. Going into the 1989 NBA draft, there was some concern over Elliott's health, as rumors came out that he had liver problems, as well as a knee injury he had suffered in high school, which was the reason he wore his trademark knee brace, as there was belief his knee would deteriorate quickly in the pros, even though multiple NBA team doctors deemed his knee a non-issue. But even with these concerns, he was firmly in the conversation for the #1 overall pick.
With the 3rd pick in the 1989 NBA draft, the San Antonio Spurs select Sean Elliott from the University of Arizona.
So he didn't go first, but he wasn't waiting long. The Spurs were coming off a 21-61 season, and had made a big offseason move in trading their defensive star Alvin Robertson to Milwaukee for a more offensive-minded big man in Terry Cummings. And although Elliott was their prized rookie selection, he would be overshadowed by an incoming rookie that they had selected 2 years earlier, who had just finished his 2-year term with the Navy. And these 3 acquisitions would lead the charge in what would become the biggest one-season turnaround in NBA history at the time. The Spurs would improve by 35 wins behind one of the best rookie seasons in NBA history that saw Robinson named unanimous Rookie of the Year. And even though Robinson and Cummings were the team's top players, Elliott would quietly have a very respectable rookie season. He would play in 81 games, starting 69 of them, and would average double figures. He would hit double figures in 40 games and have 6 games with at least 20, and would also show his defensive ability with a career-high 6 steals in a November 18th win versus New Jersey. The Spurs also made a mid-season trade that saw them swap veteran point guard Maurice Cheeks for New York's disgruntled second-year guard Rod Strickland, and would go 21-9 after the trade to finish the year at 56-26 and win the division. They would get a first-round matchup versus Denver, who they would sweep, in what would be a great playoff debut for Elliott. In the 3 games, he would put up over 14 points per game on over 55% shooting. Round 2 would be a great playoff series versus Clyde Drexler and the Portland Trail Blazers. The series would go the full 7 games, as Elliott continued his great efficiency, averaging 12 points on over 55% from the field, including 21 points on 60% shooting in Game 5. Unfortunately for San Antonio, an ill-advised pass from Rod Strickland in the final minute of overtime in Game 7 led to a Clyde Drexler breakaway, which Strickland fouled him on, leading to 4 free throws, and that put the game out of reach for the Spurs. And Elliott's rookie season saw him average about 10 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game, as he was named second-team All-Rookie. The 91 Spurs had another great season, with a top 5 scoring defense and top 10 scoring offense. And one of the big reasons they went from the 17th ranked offense to the 9th ranked offense was Sean Elliott, as he elevated his scoring by nearly 6 points to finish 3rd on the team, while playing and starting all 82 games. And his improvement saw him finish 6th in voting for the Most Improved Player award, as he would also average a career-high 5.6 rebounds per game. He would have 70 games in double figures and crack 30 points twice, and his passing would be on display during a November 7th win versus Denver, as he dished a career-high 12 assists. Even with Strickland missing 24 games and Cummings missing 15, the Spurs still finished with a nearly identical record at 55-27 to win the division again, and enter the playoffs as the favorites versus a Golden State Warriors team led by their Run TMC trio, Elliott would have a slow start to the series, as he had 11 points on just 3 of 11 shooting in a Game 1 win. Then in Game 2, after starting 0 for 3, he would be knocked out for the rest of the game after a Tyrone Hill elbow broke his nose in a Warriors win. He returned for Game 3 with a face mask and played great, putting up 24 points on 50% shooting. However, the Spurs would lose again and be facing elimination going into Game 4. Elliott would again play great with 23 points and 8 rebounds on over 57% shooting in Game 4, but the Spurs would lose, as they were upset by the 7-seed Warriors. And Elliott's regular season saw him put up about 16 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. The Spurs would take a step back in '92, as 4 starters missed at least 12 games over the course of the season. But Elliott would be the one who didn't miss any, as he played and started all 82 games for the second straight season. He would improve his scoring again to finish third on the team, and shot a career-high 49.4% from the field, as he had 71 games in double figures, 4 double-doubles, and 2 games with at least 30. Head coach Larry Brown was fired on January 21st after a 21-17 start, and replaced with Bob Bass. Robinson was having another great year and would even be named Defensive Player of the Year. But with the team sitting at 40-25, he suffered a thumb injury in a game versus Charlotte. He would play 3 more games before being shut down for the season after surgery. And without Robinson, they would go 5-9 the rest of the way to finish the year at 45-37. But Robinson was still on the mend going into the playoffs, and the Spurs were without starter Willie Anderson as well. The Spurs would get Phoenix in the first round, and Elliott would have another great playoff series, as he finished tied for second on the team in scoring with nearly 20 points per game. But after losing the first 2 games in Phoenix, they would lose Strickland for Game 3, and Elliott's 17 points on 6 of 16 shooting in Game 3 would be his worst game of the series, as the Spurs were knocked out in the first round for the second straight season. And for the regular season, Elliott averaged about 16.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. During the summer, Terry Cummings suffered a serious knee injury during a pickup game, which would keep him out of all but 8 games of the '93 season. And even when he did return, he was no longer the same player, and became a role player for the rest of his career. Willie Anderson would also only play 38 games after 2 leg surgeries. And on top of that, the Spurs had lost Strickland in free agency. They would trade for sharpshooter Dale Ellis in the offseason, so they were a much different looking team going into 1993. And it didn't help that they would go through 3 different coaches this season. Elliott would continue to improve, as he would finish the year as the team's second leading scorer behind a healthy Robinson, while shooting over 49% from the field and over 35% from deep. He would hit double figures in 68 of the 70 games he played, and score his career high of 41 in a December 18th win versus Dallas. The Spurs started the year 9-11 under head coach Jerry Tarkanian before he was fired. They would go 1-0 under interim coach Rex Hughes, and then finally would hire John Lucas, who would help them go 39-22 the rest of the way, as they finished the year at 49-33. And Elliott's great play was recognized, as he would be voted to his first career All-Star game this season. The Spurs got a first-round matchup with Portland, and made it out of the first round for the first time in 3 years. Elliott continued his great postseason play by finishing second on the team in scoring and shooting over 54% from the field, as the Spurs won in 4 games. Round 2 brought a rematch with Phoenix, but the Spurs would fall in 6 games. Phoenix won the first 2 before the Spurs evened it up, but then would lose the next 2 as Charles Barkley put away the Spurs with a last-second shot in Game 6. Elliott had trouble with his efficiency, as he shot just 43% from the field and went 1 of 9 from deep, but would still finish as the team's second leading scorer. And his regular season saw him average about 17 points, 4.5 rebounds, and a career-high 3.8 assists per game. Elliott really seemed to be finding his groove in San Antonio, but then about a month before the start of the season, the Spurs took a chance on an unhappy yet elite defender in Detroit. Elliott was the main piece in a package sent to the Pistons for their former 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, Dennis Rodman, as Elliott joined a Pistons team on a rapid decline from their back-to-back titles just a few years earlier. The Pistons still featured some of the key pieces from these great teams, like their backcourt of Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars, as well as big man Bill Laimbeer, and had also added shooting guard Allen Houston in the draft, but this would be a very dysfunctional season for Detroit. Laimbeer would retire after just 11 games, as this was in some part due to getting into a fight with Thomas during practice, which led to Thomas breaking his hand, and then on April 19th, Thomas would tear his Achilles in a game versus the Magic, which would ultimately end his career. So with all this happening, it was understandable that the Pistons weren't going to have a good season, and that would be reflected in their 20-62 record. But after acquiring a player like Elliott, who had improved in every season up to this point, it was thought that he would be a bright spot for the team. But this wouldn't be the case. Elliott played in 73 games, but his scoring was down by over 5 points from the previous season, although he was still shooting over 45%. And obviously there were going to be growing pains coming to a team in transition with a different system, but you couldn't help but wonder if it was something more than just an off year from Elliott. And the Pistons were quick to give up on Elliott as well. On February 5th, they agreed to a trade that would have sent Elliott to Houston, as the Rockets were looking for additional scoring to complement Hakeem Olajuwon. But just a few days later, the Rockets vetoed the trade, as Elliott had failed his physical due to kidney infection. And this helped explain better why Elliott appeared overweight and out of shape, as it was not fitness as much as it was being bloated and swollen from his kidney ailment. So Elliott would remain a Piston for the remainder of the season, and after doctors cleared him to play, he would suit up for 33 more games for Detroit, before ending the season averaging about 12 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. In the offseason, Elliott would be traded back to San Antonio for Bill Curley and a future second-round pick, as he would be reunited with Robinson and the player he was traded for a year earlier. Elliott looked like he never left, as he came back to play and start 82 games, while putting up a then career-high scoring average while shooting over 40% from deep to finish second on the team behind league MVP Robinson. But this season was filled with conflict between Spurs management and Dennis Rodman, as he would miss 19 games due to suspension as well as taking a leave of absence, and then would miss another chunk of the season after suffering a shoulder injury in a motorcycle accident, as overall he played just 49 games for the team. Even with all this drama, the Spurs finished with a then franchise record 62 wins, as they had the best record in the league. The Spurs would face the Nuggets in round 1, who they would sweep, as Elliott tied for the team lead in scoring, with Robinson having a down series. He would shoot over 53% from the field and 60% from deep, as the Spurs advanced to a second-round matchup versus the Lakers. This would be a 6-game series win for San Antonio, as Robinson would have a much improved second round, which was needed, as Elliott struggled. He was still second on the team in scoring with nearly 17 points per game, but would shoot just 38% from the field. However, he would have his postseason career high of 26 points and go 4 for 7 from deep in the series clinching Game 6. The Western Conference Finals would be a matchup versus the defending champion Houston Rockets, in a series that has become better known for Hakeem Olajuwon's dismantling of David Robinson. The Spurs would lose the first 2 games before winning the next 2, but would then lose games 5 and 6 to lose the series. Elliott would again finish second on the team in scoring at about 17 points on over 46% shooting, but Olajuwon's 35.3 points per game would be too much for San Antonio, and Elliott's season ended with him averaging about 18 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. 96 would be Elliott's best season as a pro. He would finish second on the team in scoring, while averaging 20 points for the first and only time in his career, as he would also shoot over 41% from deep on a career-high 2.1 makes per game. He would hit double figures in 70 games and have 8 games with at least 30, and would be voted to his second and final All-Star game of his career. The Spurs were a similar team to the year before, however they had traded Robin to Chicago during the offseason for Will Perdue, but they again stayed healthy to win the division with a 59-23 record. They would enter the playoffs with a matchup versus Phoenix, who they would defeat in 4 games. Elliott had another solid series as the team's second leading scorer, while shooting 49% from the field and over 35% from deep, as they moved through to a second-round matchup with Utah. However, they would fall in 6 games, as Robinson averaged less than 20 points for the series, and Elliott struggled, putting up about 14 points on 33% shooting, as he shot over 40% just once in the series. And the regular season saw him put up a career-high 20 points, about 5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. 1997 would be a disaster for San Antonio. Robinson dealt with back issues during the preseason, which kept him out until December. Then after 6 games, he broke his foot in a December 23rd game versus Miami, which ended his year with the Spurs sitting at 6-18. And a few games before this injury, head coach Bob Hill had been fired and replaced with GM Greg Popovich. Then in mid-February, Elliott would be shut down for the rest of the year after undergoing surgery to correct tendonitis in his quadriceps. On top of that, the Spurs dealt with injuries to role players like Chuck Person and Charles Smith, as they would finish the year at 20-62. The Spurs had signed a bit of insurance during the offseason in a 37-year-old Dominique Wilkins, and even though he had a good year, he wasn't going to save the team. Elliott's numbers took a big dip, as even in the 39 games he did play, he wasn't playing at 100%, and his regular season saw him average about 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. The Spurs' terrible season turned out to be the best thing that could have happened, as they received the top pick in the '97 NBA draft, and would select Wake Forest's Tim Duncan. Robinson would also return to play 73 games this year, and although he had lost a step, he was still one of the premier players in the league, as he and Duncan formed San Antonio's Twin Towers duo. Unfortunately, Elliott's 1998 season would be much of the same, as he would appear in just 36 games while averaging single-digit scoring for the first time in his career, and on January 21st, he would be shut down for the remainder of the season with another quadriceps injury. However, Duncan was everything he was supposed to be and more, as similar to Robinson's rookie season, his arrival sparked a 36-game improvement for San Antonio, as they finished the year at 56-26. They would make the playoffs and defeat Phoenix in 4 games, before falling to Utah in 5 games in the second round, and Elliott's second straight shortened season would see him average about 9.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. The lockout shortened 99 season allowed Elliott more time to rest his knee, and in turn he was able to play and start all 50 games this year. Duncan had firmly cemented himself as the best player on the team, and even though Elliott would never put up numbers like he once did, he finished third on the team in scoring as one of 3 players to average double figures. The Spurs started the season slow, as they were 6-8 after 14 games, but would then go on a 9-game win streak and also put together 6 and 7-game win streaks before finishing the year on a 5-game win streak, as they had a league best 37-13 record. They would face a young T-Wolves team in the first round who they beat in 4 games. Elliott fell to 4th on the team in scoring, but provided great floor spacing for Duncan and Robinson. Round 2 would be a 4-game sweep of the Lakers. Elliott would be the team's second leading scorer for the series, as the Spurs advanced to the conference finals versus Portland. This would be Elliott's best series of the postseason, as he put up 15 points per game on over 58% shooting, which included a 22-point performance on 8 of 10 shooting in Game 2. And Game 2 would also include the most famous moment of Elliott's career, when with under 10 seconds left and the Spurs down by 2, Elliott received an inbounds pass while falling out of bounds, but he would balance himself enough to get off a 3-pointer, which would be good, and would give the Spurs a 1-point win on a shot now known as the Memorial Day Miracle. After 2 close wins in the first 2 games, the Spurs would win the next 2 convincingly, to make their first NBA Finals appearance versus a New York Knicks team, who were without their star center Patrick Ewing. And the Spurs would complete their dream season by defeating New York in 5 games to win their first title in franchise history. Elliott did not have a good offensive showing, as he put up just 8 points per game on about 33% shooting, but he made up for it through his defense, as throughout the series he played great defense on the Knicks wing duo of Allen Houston and Latrell Sprewell. So after 2 straight injury-filled seasons and a serious kidney issue, Sean Elliott was an NBA champion after a decade in the league. And for the regular season, he averaged about 11 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. Shortly after the season, Elliott announced that he was suffering from the kidney disease known as... I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but he would need a kidney transplant. And because of this, he would have to sit out indefinitely while waiting for a donor. But Elliott had known about his worsening kidney since before the '99 playoffs, but chose to continue to play as he felt he had a responsibility to the team. Luckily for Elliott, his brother was a match and donated his kidney to Elliott during the summer. But the recovery would be a long process that wasn't made any easier when Elliott was hospitalized with pneumonia in late December. So the Spurs' championship defense started without Elliott, and they were playing well, sitting at 40-23 on March 14th, when the headline broke that Elliott would be returning to the lineup for their game versus Atlanta, making Elliott the first professional athlete to return to play after a kidney transplant. He would start and score 2 points in 15 minutes of action, and would go on to start all 19 games remaining in the season, playing about 20 minutes per game, as the Spurs went 13-6 with Elliott in the lineup, to finish the season at 53-29. However, a late season meniscus injury to Duncan would keep him out of the Spurs' first round series versus Phoenix, and without Duncan, they would lose in 4 games. Elliott would play and start in all 4 games, and would average 14 points over the first 2 games, but he struggled in games 3 and 4, only averaging 6 points per game, and his brief comeback season saw him average about 6 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. Elliott returned for 2001 and appeared in 52 games, starting 34 of them, as he improved on his totals from last season and shot a career-high 42.6% from deep, which would be 11th in the league. Duncan was back healthy, and the Spurs had added swingman Derek Anderson in the offseason, as they would finish the year 58-24. For the first time in his postseason career, Elliott would come off the bench, and began the playoffs with a first-round matchup versus Minnesota, who San Antonio would sweep, as Elliott would average just 2.5 points for the series. They would then defeat the Mavs in 5 games in round 2, and Elliott would again have minimal contributions. But he would have 17 points on 5 of 8 shooting in a Game 3 win. The conference finals brought the Lakers, who were too much for San Antonio, as they were defeated in 4 games, with Elliott averaging only about a point and logging a DNP in Game 3. And Elliott's regular season ended with him averaging about 8 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. After the season, Elliott would effectively retire from the NBA, after a consistent 12-year career that saw him help elevate the Spurs into the NBA's elite. He wasn't the type of player who was going to drop 25 a night, but his contributions were always more than enough to improve the team he was on, while doing so quite efficiently. He was a great postseason performer who got a well-deserved championship near the end of his career, and it was a career that could have ended much earlier due to an ailment that was not just career-threatening, but life-threatening. But no matter what he was going through, he never gave up on the team and never made excuses. And it's not really surprising that a player of his mental fortitude would be the first to come back from such a serious condition. David Robinson gets most of the credit for bringing San Antonio out of their dark days, but Sean Elliott is the unsung hero, who deserves a lot of credit of his own for San Antonio's turnaround. Like a lot of overlooked players, he doesn't get the recognition because he never needed the recognition. He was there to give maximum effort and play winning basketball, which is exactly what he did. And it really doesn't matter who you're a fan of, Sean Elliott is a player that gets respect from everyone. But that's it for today's episode on Sean Ninja Elliott. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for plenty more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his teammates in San Antonio, or this one on his brief teammate in Detroit. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.